Problem with it was, I've interviewed some pro-Palestinian voices in the last 2 weeks who were emphatic immediately. Let me make it clear. What happened on October the 7th was a disgusting terrorist attack, an abomination. And then they go on to talk about the plight of the Palestinian people and maybe the historical conflict and so on. And I have great respect for people that do that. I've got to say, I really struggle with anyone who just cannot have the humanity to start by saying what happened on October the 7th was appalling, an outrage. Do you feel it was?
I think Palestinians are tired of that being the starting point constantly, when right now there are 6,000 Palestinians who have been killed in Gaza, over 2,500 of them children, 33 mosques leveled, hospitals leveled. So we're tired of that being the main goal of the conversation.
It's not the main goal.
Part of it.
It's the starting point of this war. Yeah, but hang on. It's the starting point of this war. It's not the main goal of what I want the conversation to be.
The starting point was when 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed, were expelled from their homelands during the Nakba, which my grandparents fled Palestine because of the Nakba, because of the massacres and the rapes that they heard. So to me, that's the starting point. That's my experience.
Let's go with that for a minute. Let's start with the Nakba, because the only Nakba is the part that people forget to address. 1948, after the partition plan, the Jewish state called in the Arabs to live prosperously and peacefully in the land. But what happened the very next day, not even 24 hours later, is the alleged Nakba, where the Arab leagues declared war on the Jewish state, that we just agreed to have our two-state solution. And what did they tell their people? Leave the state, let us get the land back, let's ethnically cleanse the Jewish people, and once we defeat them in this war, you will come back to the land. So the only Nakba was a catastrophe that you guys, the Arab leagues, waged a war that you could not win, and that is why, I'm sorry, your grandparents had to leave their homes.
That's completely ahistorical. I don't represent the Arab League. I'm Palestinian, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Palestinians.
But why do you find it hard to just start, given this war, this latest war that's erupted, began with a terror attack on October the 7th, why is it hard to not just say, that was terrible?
I don't see you asking Regev if he condemned the slaughter of innocent civilians.
You can't do it, can you?
No, she can't, because she's the same woman who said every Zionist before they die should hear pop, pop before they die. So she probably agrees with the massacre. So why would she condemn them?
I think the media is part of manufacturing consent.
We're talking about you.
I'm speaking here, and I'm not interested in speaking to genocide deniers. The media is manufacturing consent for genocide against the Palestinian people, just like they did with the lie of the weapons of mass destruction that was used to justify the murder of over 1 million Iraqis. And there's been many lies that have been repeated all over the news, including on your show, where CNN had to rescind, and even you said in subsequent interviews about the 40 beheaded babies. I haven't seen a single shred of evidence. Seen a single shred of evidence about these accusations coming out.
I was actually deliberately misquoted. You raised an interesting point there about this issue of the beheaded babies from the October 7th terrorist attack. I was accused by Bassem Youssef of saying on air that 40 babies had been beheaded. I never said that. I said there were reports that 40 babies had been killed and that some had been beheaded. That appears to have been borne out by other reporting, but I haven't seen the full details of every single casualty, so I don't know for sure. I certainly never said 40 babies were beheaded, but that clip has gone around the world, and I've been bombarded with abuse based on an absolute lie.
I don't see a big difference between saying 40 babies were beheaded versus maybe, 40
some. You don't think there's between 40 and some?
Because at the same, that's the lie that's being used to kill 6,000 Palestinians in Gaza right now.
Okay, well, let me ask Emily. All right, let me ask Emily with this question. I've asked Nadine, can she say she was horrified by what happened on October?
She wasn't.
And she will not say that, which I think is very disappointing. Would you, in return, when you look at what's been happening in Gaza in the last 2 weeks, do you find that appalling, that the loss of young lives, of babies, of children, of women, innocent people who had nothing to do with the terror attacks?
Absolutely, 100%. Any death of innocent civilians should be condemned privately and publicly, and I cannot believe I have to say that. So yes, every children that is being collateral damage, every woman that's becoming collateral damage, my heart aches for them.
Why can't you do that?
I think we all agree that the loss of innocent life is sad, but I believe that the loss of innocent life wouldn't be an issue.
It's okay when
Israel
it's the
didn't
Jews.
ethnically cleanse Palestine to begin with in 1948.
Well, they didn't, and that's
that is the source of this. To me, I go to the source of the issue.
But
what happened on October 7th isn't the beginning of what Palestinians
but had you asked me, okay, but Nadine, ask me.
That's not the starting point.
Why don't you ask me what do I think of that? You have a lot of preconceived views of what you think I think. I agree with you. I think the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in 1948 is the root cause of all of this.
Well, you can thank the Arab Leagues for declaring war on the two-state solution.
There are myriad people at fault in the next 70 years.
We were ethnically cleansed from our land. It's not like Jewish people were ethnically cleansed from the land of Palestine. They colonized it from other people.
But I'm
actually discussing with him. I refuse to speak to genocide deniers.
Well,
I refuse to speak to genocide deniers.
She's not a genocide denier. She's not.
Do you know the definition of a genocide?
No, I do know the definition of a genocide. Gaza currently is a concentration camp because the Palestinians.
You think Hamas wages genocide?
I believe that. Look at the numbers. Look at the Palestinians who have been killed.
Hamas's stated purpose.
We're not here to talk about any specific
is to eradicate
entities.
the Jewish people. It's their stated purpose.
The first thing that we should be fighting
that's literally
is for
genocide.
Palestinians to be returned home to their homeland.
That is literally
talk about the specifics
Hamas's stated purpose is literally the definition of genocide. It's wiping out people based on their ethnicity.
The hostages who were released had otherwise to say.
Oh, the 2 out of 250. Let's applaud Hamas. You can't. Okay.
The hostages that Israel didn't even want to take to begin with. They didn't even want to take them back.
But they did take them. The Palestinians need to divorce
as they bomb Gaza, risking their own hostages.
I'm going to keep speaking.
They don't care about killing them.
Palestine needs to be liberated from Hamas because when your governing body is a terrorist organization, that is the root of the problem, not the alleged ethnic cleansing.
The ethnic cleansing of Palestine happened decades before Hamas was even created.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Hamas should stay in power in Gaza?
I'm not here to talk about political organizations. No, I don't care about these questions because my people are being ethnically cleansed. Because I see the faces of 2,500 Palestinian children on social media every day, charred, mutilated, having chemical weapons against them. So this is going to be my priority on this show, just like any Palestinian around the world is speaking up for our cause.
You will also
stop using babies as human shields. Stop.
It's the most densely populated region in the world.
Yeah, but you will also know
2.3 million Palestinians. Half of them are homeless.
Let me respond to you.
This is a ridiculous argument.
My question is whether you think it is good for the Palestinian people that Hamas stay in charge, given the scale of the terror attacks they carried out, given the inevitable response that's come from Israel, with the inevitable loss of Palestinian lives, given the displacement now of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of the north of Gaza into the south, and who knows what's going to happen. The devastation to Gaza and to Gazan people has been unbelievable, and yet entirely predictable once Hamas decided to carry out the terror attack on the scale they did. I simply ask you, do you think that's a good thing for Palestine?
Is it not predictable that there will continue to be resistance to oppression as long as apartheid, occupation, ethnic cleansing, genocide continues to exist? Whether Hamas exists or not is an irrelevant question. Because as long as oppression against the Palestinian people exists, we will continue
How can you end that oppression as you see it? And many would agree with you.
Why don't we address the oppression first? She called Israel an apartheid state. So I'd like to just define what apartheid is. It is segregation, like what South Africa is facing. But the alleged apartheid is because Israel set up security measures after the numerous bus bombings in 2000 and set up checkpoints, which they got very insulted by. But it's the same way that airports now require security after 9/11, reasonably so. So it is taking security precautions. Secondly, we have 3 Arabs, and if I'm not mistaken, Muslims currently sitting in the Knesset. Does that sound like apartheid to you?
Let me quote the Israeli defense minister and how they view Palestinians. He said that we are fighting against human animals, that our soldiers will not be accountable for anything. There will be no fuel, no food, no water, and Gaza will cease to exist. This is what Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, has said. This is how they refer to Palestinians.
I think one of the big problems,
this is beyond apartheid.
I think one of the big problems leading up to this has been...
That's not apartheid. That's
beyond
let me just say what I think.
That's the language of ethnic cleansing and genocide, beyond apartheid.
Let me make the point I want to make, which is I think one of the problems leading up to this is that Benjamin Netanyahu, for political expediency to remain in power, has packed his cabinet with a bunch of right-wing headbangers whose rhetoric actually was incredibly incendiary and incredibly unhelpful. So I do think that. Actually.
And you know what? Even if you're right, unfortunately, the narrative that it's about the land, I'm sorry, the Hebron massacres in 1927, 1929, that was not about Israel. It is about the murder of Jews all over the world. National Jihad Day that I had to worry about being in Manhattan last Friday was not about Israel.
You mean the day where we had a protest where thousands of New Yorkers came out? That's not a national day of jihad. You're talking about a National Day
Let me
of
ask you
Jihad.
both.
She's
All right,
afraid for her life. Who was killed in America? Who was killed? A 6-year-old Palestinian boy
And a
was
rabbi
killed in
last
Chicago.
week. You wanna
was
compare
stabbed
numbers?
26
That was appalling.
times.
It was appalling.
26
appalling.
times.
Yeah, but Nadine,
and
I
you're
can-
talking about being afraid
Nadine,
for your life.
I can
I'm
say-
constantly afraid for my life
I
as a
can
Palestinian
say, I
living in a
can say
Zionist
to those
city and
examples you
Zionist-controlled
just gave,
media.
they are appalling, appalling. But I also find it very dispiriting that you can't just take a moment to say what happened to the people in Israel on October the 7th was also appalling.
But it came out of her mouth. She wants the Zionists dead, so how is she supposed to condemn it?
It would not have happened had Israel not initiated this, and you know this from the beginning. I think we always need to
Israel
go back
did
to
nothing
yes,
that
they
warranted
did.
what happened on October the 7th. Nothing.
Israel.
Nothing. The scale of that terror attack is like saying that America brought 9/11 on itself. I remember people saying that in the streets afterwards.
I think she
and
wants
that was
to go back
equally
in time and
that
yell
was
at the
equally
United Nations for
equally
dividing the land.
repellent to me. A terror attack is a terror attack is a terror attack. What Hamas did that day was unconscionable.
We have
anyone
no state,
with an
no
ounce of
government,
humanity
no army.
has to say that.
Anything that Palestinians do to defend themselves
did you-
will always be categorized as a terrorist attack because this is
wanna
the
ask her a
position that the
question.
world has put us in.
Right,
I'm
final
not
point to
responding to
Emily.
your questions.
I have a question.
respond
When was
to
the
his
last time
questions.
Palestine had full sovereignty over the land? Give me a date or even a year that Palestine had their own
I'm not
government.
going to engage
their
with
own-
genocide
Can
deniers. If you
ask
wanna
her
make
that
a point, you
question
can
for me
say
because she
that.
wants to be a child. How are you an attorney? God. Can you ask her when did Palestine have full sovereignty over the land?
When did
I'm not here to
Palestine
talk
have full
about when did
sovereignty?
full sovereignty. And I
because
see
the
that you're
answer is
taking
they
your
never
talking points
did.
from her.
Well,
Can
you don't want to
ask-
talk to me.
It's a question.
He has to do
You don't have to answer
Do you
it.
want to answer me? And stop being a child? If you have a Jew in court, are you not going to represent them as an attorney?
This has nothing to do with Jewish people.
No, it does.
We
'cause
actually
the
have
Hamas
Jewish
charter says
people
so, and you're
protesting on the
defending
streets of
Hamas.
New York
Yeah,
City.
but hang on.
In defense of Palestine.
Okay,
unequivocal
let's not all
people.
shout over each other, but it has everything to do with Jewish people when Hamas's stated intent is to wipe Jewish people off the face of
I'm
the
not
earth.
the spokesperson of Hamas.
No, but
I don't
you
know
should be
why
able
from
to
what
say
you're
that's
getting at
wrong.
this conversation, that's all you're talking
Because
about.
you're defending
No,
them.
I'm here to flip the narrative and make sure
You
that
know
people
why we're all
that
sitting
this
here?
government is funding Israel to the tune of $10 million a day, $3
right.
billion a year, and they're asking for an additional $14 billion in aid.
Okay.
The bombs that are being manufactured by U.S. companies are what's being dropped on Gaza. The world is watching a genocide
Okay.
happening and is not doing anything
Biden gave
about
$100
it.
million
So the most
to Gaza
important
and
thing for me
terrorists.
to
Okay.
do
We have
right
to-
now is to stop this genocide.
Okay.
address
And
your
questions
question.
about Hamas are not going to do that.
Okay.
It's condemning
It's the
genocide of the
government of
Palestinian
Palestine.
people and condemning the UK
Nadine?
and US governments
Nadine?
that we live under, that I pay taxes to,
Nadine?
that are killing Palestinian people every day. And the UN
Nadine?
already said that Gaza would be unlivable by 2020. The UN had already said that most of the hospitals in Gaza, at least 2/3 of the healthcare facilities, are not being able
saw
to
that today,
provide.
yeah.
Are not able to.
I think
to
it's wrong.
function. So it's
I think
not
it's
just
wrong,
the
Nadine.
airstrikes and the missiles that are going to kill people. The siege and blockade has been killing people,
You
and
should
it
be
will
able,
continue to
Nadine,
people.
you should be able to say that that is all wrong, which I believe it is wrong, and you should also be able to say that what happened on October the 7th was wrong. A
If you
human,
believe it's
a human
wrong, break
being
the siege
who
and break
cares
the blockade
equally
on
about the
Gaza.
lives of all human beings would be able to say that
I do
both
care
those
about
things
the
are wrong.
lives of all human beings equally, and that's why exactly I believe
Okay.
that in order to preserve human life, you must end the siege on Gaza,
Okay.
you must end the blockade,
We've run out of-
you must end the settler
I hear you.
colonization of
Listen,
Palestine.
Listen, it's
Free
a
Palestine from Hamas.
It's a passionate debate, and I understand why emotions run high. I appreciate you both coming in. Thank you very much indeed. Come back. Let's continue the debate. You only get to peace in these things, I can promise you, by thrashing these things out. People that hate each other have to come together and they have to try and find places of compromise. Otherwise, you never get to peace. 70 years this has been going on. 70 years.
You need justice to get peace.
You need justice
and we
and you
need
need
terrorists
compromise
outside of
and
the
you need
government.
both sides to acknowledge when bad things happen, you can say that is unacceptable. On October the 7th, if any tiny part of you says that was not